and our whole festival possible. We also want to extend our deepest thanks to Philadelphia Cultural Fund. Our 2020 Arts and Culture grantee has allowed us to further our creative work for the good of our community and for all Philadelphians. Now, as we work to amplify untold voices, we would like to recognize that we are on the Lenni Lenape land. The Lenape people are the native inhabitants of Delaware, New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, and Southern New York. The history of our indigenous people is one that we wish to honor, respect, and protect. If you'd like, when we start our Q&A after the show, please take a moment to update and rename yourself to include your pronouns. If you're wondering what this is, you can just put right next to your name whether you prefer or whether you use, she, her, he, him, they, them. Please note that your video will remain off and your audio for the duration of the show, but will be turned back on so that we can all do an applause together at the curtain call. And then at the end of the reading, we do invite you to stay with us. We're going to have a conversation and a talk back with our artists and a couple of special guests. At that time, we encourage you to please share your questions. You can put them in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand, or simply unmute yourself. You actually, if you come up with a question during the show, go ahead and put it right into the Q&A chat box. This will not interrupt the performance at all. Today's performance is directed by Ginger Agnew, stage managed by Hannah Spear, and performed by Miranda Thompson as Frances E.W. Harper and Ida Wells Barnett, Tammy Cooper as Sojourner Truth and Mary Church Terrell, Cashia Fitzgerald Bryant as Mary Ann Shad Cary, and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin and Prisoner. Janelle T. Harvey as Chorus, Frederick Douglass, Senator Burns, and various other characters. Shannon Agnew as Susan B. Anthony, Alice Hall, and Mrs. Burns. Erin Agnew as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Harriet Stanton, Blatch. Ginger Agnew as Lucretia Mott, and Cary Chapman Catt. For the full festival guide, please see the chat. And thank you all for joining us today to amplify Untold Voices. Enjoy the show. Thank you.
Ain't Your Our History by Rachel Atkins. Prologue, the start of the movement.
Welcome to the 19th century America, where no woman has any legal right to her own money, property, children, or body, free or enslaved.
Truth enters.
Sojourner Truth, you know who I am. You might have even grown up on the street with my name on it. But I am not the woman you think you know. The real Sojourner Truth. Flesh and bone, heart and soul, words and deeds is not the story you hear.
Anthony enters.
This is not my history.
For some, I am the women's suffrage movement. I shot these men a look with my lazy eye, and they handed us the vote like a slice of cherry pie. It's a lot of pressure to be a symbol.
Tell me about it.
For all I did, there were hundreds, thousands of other women who also gave their lives to this movement.
White and black.
I'm as much to blame as anyone else. They're forgotten.
Stanton enters.
This is not their history.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Maybe you've heard of me. Maybe you haven't. If not, it's not for my lack of trying. I wrote the book on women's history, and still I'm ignored, erased by the men who wrote over my version with their own. You'll remember me now.
Harper enters.
This is not your history.
Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. I say it's pretty damn unlikely you've heard of me, and if you have, what are the chances you know why or what I did? But isn't that the lot of the colored women in this land? I don't need you to remember me. I know who I am. Poet, novelist, activist, mother, teacher, speaker. I don't need you to remember me, but you should. This ain't our history.
The history you think you know about how women got the vote and just about everything else.
Except equal pay or equal rights, but that's a different story.
That history is a lie.
Series of omissions, deletions, exclusions.
A whitewash.
That is the word for it.
You want to know the truth?
Or at least something a whole lot closer to it?
Link arms. Put the Black women at the center to protect them.
If only that was enough.
We want to put the Black women in the center, but we can't.
History doesn't allow it.
No matter how we try, it's not how the story goes.
We're gonna have to make do the best we can.
Just like Black women have always done.
We stand here before you, an oppressed class.
We trust we have the audience's sympathy, and you will bear with us.
A generation of women is ready to rise up with purpose.
Ready to stage a rebellion like the world has never seen.
1832, Female Anti-Slavery Society.
Daughters of Africa, how long shall we bury our minds and talents beneath a load of pots and kettles?
No longer, Mrs. Harper.
We've never had the chance to show our abilities, so the world thinks we know nothing. But it's not the color of the skin that makes the woman. It's the principle in her soul.
Ladies, have you seen the mob of men out there shouting about how females should be seen and not heard?
So what else is new?
This time they've got torches.
Torches? Mrs. Harper, we'd all understand if you...
Should I hold my tongue out of fear?
No.
Oh,
No. Daughters of Africa must make a mighty effort. And if no one else will promote or respect us, let us promote and respect ourselves.
Sound of glass breaking.
They're throwing stones.
And blocking the doors.
Chorus as mob enters.
The good men of this city won't tolerate women speaking in public. Burn their places to the ground.
Holds up a torch and sets fire to the building.
They're really doing it. How will we get out of here?
We stand together. Link arms. Put the colored women at the center to protect them. Show these men we won't be silenced.
May your flames light the fires of freedom.
we will speak upon the ashes.
Let them burn.
I can't believe those men actually set fire to the building with all of you inside.
You're new to social reform, Mrs. Stanton. We knew the risk of starting an all-female abolitionist society.
How can intelligent abolitionists see that mob attack you and not see the similarities between colored rights and women's rights?
We've been asking that same question in the men's anti-slavery societies for years.
Unfortunately, too many of them can see that Negroes deserve their rights, but still aren't convinced that women are entitled to any.
How can a woman fight for the rights of others without rights of her own?
Frederick Douglass enters.
'48, Seneca Falls Women's Right Convention.
Ladies of the first ever women's rights meeting.
Ladies, Mrs. Stanton?
Mr. Douglas, and gentlemen, I present to you our Declaration of Sentiments. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Whenever any government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the duty of those who suffer from it to throw it off.
Is Mrs. Stanton rewriting the Declaration of Independence?
Well, we all know who the founding fathers meant by we the people.
The history of mankind is a history of injuries by man towards woman, an absolute tyranny.
She does have a point. Men think they own us.
Men do own us, our bodies, our children,
Our wages.
which are always less than theirs.
Because men created a government that assumes a man's supremacy.
Falsely assumes white man supremacy.
And tax us to support it.
Expect us to obey their laws and them, as if they're our masters.
Keeps us out of colleges and universities and any profitable work.
Deny us our one weapon of protection, the vote.
Mrs. Stanton, we can't ask for the vote.
You want the power to make change, to abolish slavery.
No woman in the world votes.
Then American women can be the first.
Politics is a system of violence and corruption. Quakers stay out of it. Don't we, Miss Anthony?
Well, I'm only half Quaker.
To sow the seeds of progress, sometimes you have to get your hands dirty.
When have you ever gotten your hands dirty, Mrs. Stanton?
I'm a country housewife.
And I've heard you complain how it's so hard to find good help these days.
I like this voting idea. Men have made a mess of things too long. It is about time that women took matters at hand.
Like the revolutionary rebels who freed themselves from the shackles of a king.
Freed themselves, but left the shackles on our race.
What we need is universal equality.
Not everyone thinks universal includes color.
Because white people aren't expected to think of colored people at all. We must change that.
Yes. Am I not a woman?
Yes.
Yes.
This
You
is true.
are.
Yes, Mrs. Truth.
Indeed.
I have plowed and reaped and chopped and mowed. I can carry as much as any other man and eat as much too, if I can get it. If a woman has a pint and a man has a quart, why can she not have her little pint full? We will not take more than our pint will hold. The first woman God made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone. These women together ought to be able to get it right side up again.
That's right.
Mrs. Truth, you must give me a copy of that speech.
It is not written down.
So write it.
Mrs. Stanton, I was born a slave. Who do you think taught me my letters?
Oh, of course. Well, keep talking then. Men have done all the talking for centuries. It is our turn to start talking about women's rights.
Oh, the rest of us have already committed to working for abolition.
How else can I live my life? Every moment I enjoy is only an accident of being born free, while thousands of my sisters suffer.
Some of those slave sisters are my own kin.
How far south are they, Mrs. Truth?
New York.
How quickly we Northerners like to forget we've owned slaves too. Not my own family. The Anthonys have always been firm abolitionists, but Mr. Douglas is a good friend. But I just...
Who?
But is injustice to a colored man worse than to a woman?
Yes.
Yes.
And to colored women still worse.
We cannot separate being colored from being female.
An Appeal to My Countrywoman by Frances Harper. Why Sit Ye Here and Die by Maria Stewart.
And An Appeal to Women by Sarah Fortin Purvis.
For beasts, you have a gentle compassion. Your mercy and pity they share. For the wretched, the outcast, and the fallen, you have tenderness, love, and care.
But have you not, oh our well-favored sisters, just a plea or a prayer or a tear? For we women held under the shadows of agony, hatred, and fear.
Dare to be good, dare to be great. Despise the taunts of ridicule, scorn, and hate. Our skins may differ, but here we claim a sister's privilege and a sister's name.
Though black our skins as shades of night,
Our hearts are pure, our souls are right.
Color of the skin has no more consequence than the hair or the eyes.
for you, not for us.
White women may have not felt the slaveholder's lash, but our hearts have been crushed.
That's noble, as long as you see your own accident of birth free and white.
Ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, can we get back to business? All in favor of including the vote in our declaration of sentiments.
Miss Anthony, voting?
I'm only half Quaker, remember? I'm voting with my Unitarian side.
The ayes have it. Women of America demand every privilege belonging to us as citizens.
Song of the Women by Florence Kuiper.
This is a song of women sung to the marching feet
of mothers and daughters of mothers who will not take defeat.
This is the song of women sung to the marching feet
of mothers and daughters of mothers who will not take defeat.
1850 to 1860, White Marriage and Motherhood. Anthony goes to the Stanton home. Stanton is pregnant and holding a baby.
Susan, have you seen the newspapers?
Chorus as reporter enters.
These ludicrous women's rights conventions are the most shocking, unnatural incidents in the history of womanity.
Womanity? That's not a real word.
Never mind that. We are finally getting some publicity.
At my last lecture, the mayor had to sit on stage with me, gun in hand, to keep the peace. They were throwing whiskey bottles. Maybe I need to go back for speaking for temperance, too.
I'd be out there ducking bottles and bullets if I were as free as you.
5 children? Your lack of freedom is your own doing, Miss Stanton.
Mr. Stanton had a little something to do with it.
Marriage and motherhood are fine for some. But for you, or Mrs. Harper, women with a calling, it's such a waste. You have more fire in your belly than anyone I know.
When I don't have a baby in it, you mean?
I just don't understand how the woman who lit the suffrage flame under the rest of us can be content to stay at home.
Haven't I shown that I can do the work and be a wife and a mother? It's called multitasking.
I'm quite certain multitasking is another made-up word.
Maybe so, but someday someone will study the female brain and discover how much better at it women are than men.
You really think someone will study the female brain someday?
I have high hopes for our movement.
You have high hopes to call what we're doing a movement.
You're just cranky from too much time on the road. Why must the abolitionists work you so hard?
I'm in no position to complain when they're letting me use their lecture tour to speak for women's rights too.
But that's why you're so worn out. Imagine if you could speak about nothing but women's rights.
I'm speaking for equal rights for all people.
Women's rights get us halfway there.
Not as long as there's still slavery.
If only we had the money to pay you, then you wouldn't have to multitask.
We have no money because the people who would contribute don't have any money themselves. Women need her own purse.
That could be the topic of your next speech. Here, take the baby while I write.
Hands Anthony the baby. Anthony is scratching.
I think the last place I slept had fleas.
Stanton takes the baby back.
Never mind. I've got Hattie. You go change your clothes. I had your good gray dress washed.
My gray dress, but you're the one who got me into bloomers.
The trouble is, no one pays any attention to what you're saying. You wear them.
They want us to be constrained by corsets and petticoats.
We have to pick our battles. One issue at a time.
Why should men have the power to choose our clothes?
It's not always about what's right. It's about what we can get done.
Ugh. I hate that gray dress.
Once we have the vote, we'll wear whatever we want to the polls.
1850 to 1860, Black marriage and motherhood.
Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry for your loss.
Mrs. Truth, I've lost so much more than my husband. Before he was in his grave 3 months, everything we owned was swept from our hands. A neighbor claimed the bed we slept in.
And they gave it to him?
Even though it was all bought with money I earned before I even met him. Writing and selling my poetry, traveling through every state in New England, giving speeches till my voice cracked.
You know, none of that makes any difference. Once you were married, the money was his.
I didn't mind that. It was worth spending on our life together, but I wanted to have the life. Now he's gone. It's all gone.
Not all of it. Not your memories or your daughter. Try to think on the good.
I met him during my lecture tour in Ohio. He was a widower. He was kind.
And he was colored. It is lonely on the road.
I didn't set foot in a colored home for a year and a half. I've never been around so many white people.
It is taxing, I know. That was my life in slavery, remember?
I had no idea how deep he was in debt until they came to take it all away. There was nothing I could do.
That was my life in slavery too. And look at me now. Never a room to call my own, let alone a home where I could raise my children with a husband I love, relying on hospitality of strangers.
But these white folks love taking care of you, Mrs. Truth.
Yes, it does make them feel good about themselves, breaking bread with a former slave. It eases their guilt to do for me the way they do.
Then why don't you let them? Don't you deserve a rest?
I will rest when I am with my God. He has too much for me to do here on earth first. And you too. That is why you must keep the faith like Job.
I don't know that I have as much of Job's patience as you.
But you do have a calling, same as me.
What's that?
Your words, Mrs. Harper. No one can take those away from you. Publish your poetry. Write more books. Go out and lecture again.
That means being on the road all the time, leaving my daughter behind, or dragging her along.
To make a better life for her.
Elizabeth Stanton gets to stay home with her children and her husband.
Just one more distinction between white and colored women in America.
If I had died, no one would have broken up his home and taken away his means of support.
And that would be true even for Elizabeth Stanton.
How do you never get angry, Mrs. Truth?
You think I never get angry?
You don't show it.
You have never been a slave. You learn how to not show it if you want to survive.
You're stronger than I am.
No more, no less. Do not turn me into someone I am not, like the white folks do.
I'm sorry. You're right.
Yes, I am. So listen, I may not read my letters, but I can read people. And right now, I am reading you. You are grieving, but you will find your way again.
I suppose if there's any good coming from this, it's learning firsthand how women really do need their rights.
So you go out there and tell that to everyone who will listen.
Born to a race whose inheritance is outraged and wrong. Most of my life has been spent battling those wrongs, but I did not feel as keenly as others for the rights women demand until my husband died. Giving women the Bible will not cure all our ills, but it is mockery to talk of liberty and the pursuit of happiness without it. Women need power. There is no justice as long as we are unequal before the law.
Horace enters as abolitionist.
1861, war between the states declared.
Look at that. It's our biggest audience yet out there, isn't it?
And I only see a few carrying eggs and tomatoes.
Oh, I hope they're not spoiled. My good gray dress still stinks from our last lecture.
I dream of a day when they throw fresh vegetables at us instead of rotten ones.
Introducing Miss Susan Anthony and former slave Sojourner Truth of the Women's National Loyal League.
I never knew a slave who did not want liberty, but I also never knew one who dared say so in front of a white man.
In the same way, I never met a woman who did not say she wanted to vote where there was no fear of her father or husband.
Protesters enter, booing and hissing.
Woo!
I see some of you have the spirit of the goose and some the spirit of the snake.
That's a man's voice.
I know it feels kind of hissing and tickling to see a colored woman get up here and tell you about our rights. You may hiss as much as you like. God reckon with those who oppress other people.
If you're really a woman, prove it.
You want me to show myself?
Mrs. Truth will do no such thing.
Tar and feather her!
Where are the police?
Horace enters as police.
Officer, you must stop these men.
Why? Does the Negro belong to you?
I belong to no one but myself.
This is Sojourner Truth. She's the Libyan symbol.
Don't matter to me if she's the Queen of England. She's under arrest.
But she's the one being attacked.
Indiana Constitution forbids any Negro crossing our border. I could arrest you too for encouraging her.
Oh, here, will help me stand for Mrs. Truth and the Union cause. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Mrs. Truth, maybe we should get out of Indiana.
No need. This is hardly the first time those Hoosiers have tried to arrest me. It never sticks. I have God on my side and President Lincoln.
1863. Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation.
Valiant Soldiers, lyrics by Sojourner Truth.
He said, "Now, colored brethren, you shall be forever free from the 1st of January, 1863.
We heard and the river going rushing to the sea as it went sounding on."
All women enter, their knitting socks.
You dropped a stitch there, Mrs. Anthony.
So what? We're supposed to be sowing the seeds of progress, not socks.
Technically, we're knitting, not sewing, but point taken.
And now you want to cancel the Women's Rights Convention.
No one will come. Not while the country's at war.
Remember what happened when you started wearing those bloomers?
Don't remind me.
We have to pick our battles, one issue at a time.
But none of us belong in a sewing circle.
We are helping the war effort for women's rights, not instead. Service and sacrifice lead to suffrage.
And abolition. The Emancipation Proclamation may have freed the slaves, but slavery is still protected by the Constitution.
You know, just this morning, I saw the wheat looking mighty big, but the stalk had no wheat inside. And I said, "God, what ails this wheat?" And he said, "There's a little weevil in it." Now, this Constitution seems big too, but when I look for my rights, there are none inside. So I say, "God, what ails this Constitution?" And he said,
"There's a little weevil in it."
"We must get the weevil out."
That's it. We need a constitutional amendment to abolish slavery. We should petition Congress.
Petition Congress? I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, we do have some experience doing what has never been done before. And in truth, I do not like knitting either.
The women throw aside their knitting to circulate the petition.
No compromise with slavery.
I said no union with slaveholders.
Yes. Universal suffrage lifts the chains from all of our shoulders.
Every citizen who hates slavery and loves liberty.
Sign this petition.
This glorious revolution will not succeed until the nation has no privileged class trampling the unprivileged, but is one great privileged nation.
Song for Equal Suffrage by Charlotte Perkins Gilman.
Day of hope and day of glory after slavery and woe.
Comes the dawn of women's freedom, and the light shall grow and grow. Every man and woman equal, liberty shall know.
In freedom marching on.
Women's rights is women's duty. For our share in life we call.
Our will is not weak, and then our power is not small.
We are half of every nation. We are mothers of them all.
As peace comes marching on. The South surrenders.
A day of jubilation.
Chorus as Frederick Douglass.
13th Amendment slavery. 13th Amendment abolishes slavery. All men are free.
All men. You know they're going to take that literally.
This meeting of the American Equal Rights Association is called to order.
We've done it. Imagine how it will feel for women and Negroes to finally enter the gates of democracy together.
Don't start knocking on the gates yet. Have you seen the 14th Amendment?
It makes everyone born in the United States a citizen, even freed slaves.
Not exactly. It says all male citizens.
So they do take all men literally.
If the word male goes into the Constitution, it will take another 50 years to get it out.
Didn't I say this was going to happen?
What about the 15th Amendment?
Guarantees the right to vote shall not be denied on account of race.
With no mention of gender.
None.
Our government seems to think the whole Negro race is male.
We can't stand for this. While the 15th Amendment is still under debate, we must make sure it includes women too.
The hour belongs to the Negro.
The Negro's hour is the time for the woman to slip in.
Woman's hour will come.
This is the nation's hour to settle the rights of a citizen. Mr. Douglass, don't you agree?
I'm afraid I don't. You lose more for the Negro than you gain for the woman if you put the two together.
Do you think the Negro race is made entirely of men?
We thought you were a woman's rights man.
It's not a matter of being against women's suffrage. It's a matter of priority.
The question of precedent has no place on an equal rights platform.
If the nation can only handle one question, I would not have colored women put a single straw in the way of colored men.
I put your womanhood first, and I won't set their race before our womanhood.
But it's our race too. And if our whole race can't vote,
do you side with the men?
We are all on the same side.
Yes, for universal suffrage, all of us or none of us.
I am glad for this great stir about colored men getting their rights. But I want colored women to get theirs too. While the ice is cracked, I will step into the pool.
Women's rights are a small boat in choppy water. It may carry women to safe harbor, but it's not strong enough to bear the weight of colored men. Let them row their own craft.
And leave colored women to drown?
When women are hunted down and hung on lampposts, when they are objects of insult and outrage at every turn, then their need for the ballot will equal ours.
Is that not all true about Negro women?
Because she is Negro, not because she is woman.
The prejudice against sex is worse than against color.
Mrs. Stanton, you can't say that.
Would we be having this argument if it weren't true? The higher orders of womanhood deserve priority.
You mean white women?
I thought the question of precedence had no place here.
Intelligent, well-bred women. The political inferiors of ditch diggers and laborers. The gambler, the drunkard, Patrick and Hans and young Tongue, who never have even read the Declaration of Independence.
White women are not dewdrops exhaled from the skies.
It's unfair that women of class and privilege should see Sambo walk into the kingdom first.
Mrs. Stanton, I must denounce your use of the term Sambo.
Indeed, Mrs. Stanton, you who have welcomed so many of us into your home and stood up in our defense.
Now don't get on your high horse, Frederick. I don't mean you. I'm only making a point.
A point that justifies being elitist and racialist?
That's not a word.
Well, there should be a word for race discrimination.
There should be a word for discriminating against women, too.
There are many words for both. Society, law, life.
I want to see the colored man have all the freedoms the white man has, but I would sooner cut off my right hand than demand the ballot for man and not for women.
If any class of people needs to be lifted out their airing nothings and selfishness, it is the white women of America.
Ladies, please. It's wasting strength and time to fight with each other instead of the enemy. But power lies in a unified band of women.
It is easier to be powerless together.
Come on, Susan. If this association no longer believes in equal rights, we'll get them on our own. Any woman who will fight for universal suffrage can join us.
I only hope that when it's won, the worst of this will be forgotten.
The nation can't be free when half its citizens aren't free.
Except the only half she means are white women.
Even I know that arithmetic is wrong. Nobody is free until everybody is free.
If the movement is dividing, there's going to be another fight to get the Libyan Sybil on their side.
King Solomon himself could not split me in two.
What does that mean?
I have lived among white people all my life. You have never understood them like I do.
Thank God for that.
Yes, he has a little something to do with it.
So you won't choose a side?
I choose myself. I cannot separate being colored from being female. But as long as I continue to work with them, all of them, they cannot forget we exist.
Brother Baptists on Women's Suffrage by Rosalie Jonas.
When it comes to the question of the female vote, the ladies and the colored folk in the same boat.
We can plan at freedom so long as we play. But if we get thinking and come out and say, because one's born female and one's born black, is that any reason to set us way back? Is that any reason for setting us put?
You can bet your bottom dollar that the boss's big foot gonna sprout big claws and a big heavy shoe and come down hard on both us too.
15th Amendment passed.
Chorus as Frederick Douglass.
The rights of citizens to vote shall not be denied on account of race.
1870 to 1872, the new departure.
Maybe the new amendments aren't so bad. What if we stop asking for the vote because the Constitution tells us we already have it?
The 14th Amendment says all persons born in the United States are citizens.
Are women not people?
Are women not citizens?
Suffrages are right of citizenship.
Therefore, women have the right to suffrage.
Simple logic, even a woman can understand.
So let's test the Constitution. As many women as we can get must try to vote in every state possible.
1872, Election Day.
Women are going to the polls all the way out in Washington Territory.
A group of us tried to cast our ballots in Washington, D.C.
Go home.
Horace as registrar.
Go home. Your men don't vote for you.
And what about those of us without fathers or husbands?
Now, that's just unnatural.
They turned me away in Michigan, but I will keep on asserting myself.
Females got no more right to vote than a fly to the moon.
I've been and I've gone and I've done it here in New York. Positively voted and swore my ballot in.
The Constitution has survived the shock of women voting. Imagine that.
White women anyway.
Horace enters as police.
Miss Anthony, you're under arrest.
On what charge?
Contrary to the peace of the United States, Susan B. Anthony, a person of the female sex, did knowingly and wrongfully vote.
Get me a lawyer, Miss Stanton. This goes all the way to the Supreme Court.
Susan B. Anthony's trial in the courtroom. Horace enters as judge.
Gentlemen of the jury,
Lawyer enters.
I have decided that Miss Anthony's vote was not protected under the 14th Amendment despite her claims.
Your Honor, how can you decide without hearing the case?
There is no case. Miss Anthony knows she cast an illegal vote. She is the subject to penalty of the law.
Law made by men in favor of men against women.
I call Miss Anthony to the stand.
Yes.
A woman is not a competent witness. Gentlemen of the jury, I direct you to find her guilty.
The defendant is entitled to a trial by jury.
The sentence of the court is a fine of 100 and...
I will never pay $1. I do not consider myself subject to this court since I have no voice in the laws which put me here.
The court will not allow this...
No, Honor, even if you had done your duty of submitting my case to the jury, I would still protest. For native or foreign-born, white or black, rich or poor, educated or ignorant, sober or drunk, awake or asleep, no man is my peer but my king. Failing to get even a trial by a jury not of my peers, this verdict degrades me and every American woman from citizen to subject.
The Supreme Court upholds states' right to decide which citizens can vote.
At least the Supreme Court didn't rule that women aren't people.
Very funny.
They've given every southern state carte blanche to keep colored voters out of the polls.
In other words, watch out, Black folks. There'll be no end to the devices they'll use to take away our rights now.
Just remember, the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceeding small.
We've only lost the battle, not the war. We can't give up a constitutional amendment.
Women's suffrage rejected by Congress, 1878. Rejected, 1883, 1884, 1886. 1889, 1890, 1893, 1894, 1896.
I hope reincarnation does exist. And I hope all those pigeon-livered congressmen who oppose women's suffrage return to Earth female.
1881 through 1890, the history of women's suffrage.
Miss Anthony.
Mrs. Truth, how wonderful to see you, Mrs. Harper. Oh.
Never mind the grand reunion speech. What is this book?
Our first publication. Isn't it thrilling? The history of women's suffrage.
Except this is not our history.
Not your history? Whatever do you mean? We went through every news clipping and photograph and...
Without showing a single color face.
Mrs. Truth is mentioned several times, at least twice, including her speeches.
Written in that hackneyed, stereotypical Southern slave dialect.
Yeah, nobody ever helped me over the mud puddles, and ain't I a woman?
When did you ever hear her talk like that?
True enough. But I have my own book, remember? You are welcome to buy a copy.
This is just the first volume.
You expect to do better in volume 2?
History is not what happens. It's the story you tell about what you think happened.
History is not the truth.
And this history of yours is a fairy tale. You've erased every colored woman from the movement. You made us invisible.
It's a strategy.
How do you not see that excluding us from our race is the same as excluding you for your sex?
Race is covered by the 15th Amendment. No point in muddying the waters.
Please. You think there are any black men voting in the South anymore? From running for office to hanging from trees.
We are simply trying to achieve our goal. It's called expediency.
Your expediency is doing us far more harm than it's doing you good.
Should we really be relying on the white woman to tell our stories?
Like it or not, theirs is the story that will survive.
You think anyone is going to pay attention to women's history, no matter her color?
Ladies, we were friends once. We were allies. Can't we stop fighting? Look at us.
40 years a slave and 40 years free. I would be here 40 years more to have equal rights for all, but I'm tired.
I'm tired of educating white women.
I'm tired of begging for liberty from men not half my age and without 100th of my knowledge.
We're old war horses who have been striving over half a century for a bit of justice, no bigger than that.
And must die without seeing it.
When we began, who would have dreamed we'd have to pass this battle on to our daughters?
At least they take it up with so many of the privileges we were denied. They have only the vote to gain. We had them all.
Your white daughters only have the vote to gain, you mean? Our black daughters are still fighting for a whole lot more.
The next generation has no idea how every inch of ground they stand on has been gained by the hard work of women from the past, Negro and white. And when they win the vote, it will be one for all women, a great new millennium.
You really believe that?
If I don't, I die with my life's work in vain.
I wish I could be so sure.
We got our hands dirty, didn't we? Sowing the seeds of progress.
I would have liked to have seen the harvest.
Someday, universal suffrage will come, and everybody will think it was always so.
Just as young people today believe all the privileges women now possesses were always hers.
I wish I could name everyone who has been devoted to the cause. With such women, failure is impossible.
Song 100 Years Hence by Frances Gage, and poem Bury Me in a Free Land by Frances Harper.
100 years hence, what a change will be made in politics, morals, religion, and trade. To think for oneself then will be no offense. We'll all go free suffrage 100 years hence.
Bury me not in a land of slaves. Bury me not in a land of slaves. Make me a grave wherever you will, but bury me not in a land of slaves.
Our laws will become all the fairest of rules, our prisons converted to national schools. Respect every neighbor, we'll use common sense, just as folks ought to 100 years hence.
Make me a grave, wherever you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among the earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves.
Then woman, man's partner, man's equal shall stand, while justice and harmony govern the land. And if the millennium's not a pretense, we'll be all free and equal 100 years hence.
I ask no monument proud and high to arrest the gaze of passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves.
The Next Generation. Chorus enters, addressing the audience like a convention.
Welcome to 20th century America, where race, sex, and condition are still barriers to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Barnett enters.
We stand here before you, an oppressed class.
Terrell and Blatch enter.
Since emancipation, the movement has been so stormy.
We couldn't always tell if we were going forward or in a circle.
Paul enters.
A new generation of women is now upon the stage.
Mary Church Terrell. My friends call me Molly. Not that I have many of them. True friends, anyway. True friends are hard to come by when you're a colored woman living in a white world. Don't worry, I won't be name calling or trying to arouse sympathy. I give the bitter with the sweet.
Ruffin enters.
This is not our history.
Harriet Stanton Blatch. Hattie. Yes, Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter. My mother's child in many ways, but not all of them. I am both trying to live up to and live down her legacy. And to finish the work that she and Aunt Susan started, legacy be damned. This movement may be my birthright, but it's still not my history.
Alice Paul, no nicknames, please. Let's make this quick. We have a lot of work to do. And I'm not just speaking for the suffragists, but for every woman since I gave my whole life to this fight. literally. And then I kept on fighting for equal rights for women, even when everyone else washed their hands of it. Has the ERA passed yet? No. Then what are you doing out there?
Catt.
This is not your history.
Ida B. Wells Barnett. Growing up, I read Dickens and Shakespeare, the Brontes and the Bible, but never anything about Negroes, let alone a Negro woman. I could never see myself. Once you've heard the Black story and the woman story, you've heard it all, right? My work has been forgotten, but I refuse to lose hope. This fight's not over yet.
Link arms. Put the Black women at the center to protect them.
We can't. History doesn't allow it.
You can say it with us. This ain't nobody's history, but here we go, still making do the best we can.
Women Do Not Want It by Charlotte Perkins Gilman.
When the women's suffrage argument first stood upon its legs, they answered it with cabbages. They answered it with eggs. They answered it with ridicule. They answered it with scorn.
They called it a monstrosity that should not have been born.
When the women's suffrage argument grew vigorous and wise, and was not to be answered by these opposite replies.
We are told of disabilities, a long array of these, till one could think that womanhood was merely a disease.
But time passed on, and some way, we need not ask them how. Whatever ails those arguments, we do not hear them now.
'Twould be better for us all than say, if womanhood was free. But all women do not want it, so it must not be.
But oh, most generous brother, let us look a little more.
Have we women always wanted what you gave to us before?
1911, National Association of Colored Women.
Sisters of the National Association. It is our duty to open the eyes of an ignorant, suspicious world to this army of strong, capable colored women. Poets have never sung of us, orators never spoken of us, and scholars never written of us. But when the ballot is put in the hands of the American woman, the world will get a correct estimate of the Negro woman.
Chorus enters as mob.
Negro women are prostitutes, scoundrels, and liars. It is the white man's duty to tie that wretch Ida Barnett to a stake, brand her with a hot iron, and operate on her with a pair of shears. If she's ever seen in our city again, we'll bleed her face and hang her in front of the courthouse.
Mrs. Barnett, thank God you made it out of Memphis before that mob tracked you down. You were so lucky to have escaped with your life.
Those white men blame me for the anti-lynching riots, but all I did was publish the statistics. Facts don't lie.
I read your article about what those animals did to Tommy Moss. They were bold and foolhardy, but no surprise there.
Molly Church? How long has it been?
Since before I left for college, and it's Mrs. Terrell now.
So you managed to study Greek and still land yourself a husband despite daddy's warnings.
You already know each other?
Molly was the first woman my age I ever met with the same hopes and ambitions as my own.
Tommy's murder changed the course of my life.
Mine too. It was my revolution, shot heard around the world.
I'm sorry these attacks are the spark that brought us together. But
What else is new?
And now we have a national organization of colored women.
Lifting as we climb, onward and upward we go.
Advancing step by step by the Colorado State Federation of Colored Women's Clubs.
We are the nation's colored woman calling for a place.
We're loyal to our country and we're loyal to our race.
We're holding high the banner in the dust it must not trail.
As we go marching on.
Paul enters, pushing the Black women aside.
We are going to have a parade.
Seems like we need a revolution against these white women too.
1913, First Suffrage Parade.
1913, Woodrow Wilson's presidential inauguration.
A grand suffrage procession, the biggest public demonstration of women this country has ever seen.
Miss Paul, a demonstration wasn't what the National Association had in mind.
New ideas, Mrs. Catt. You know about the suffrage work I did in England.
British suffragettes are hooligans and scoundrels. American women are suffragists.
American women are barred from the official presidential inauguration. How can we put up with that? We'll have bans and floats for every state and decade of women's suffrage.
We have a problem.
Mrs. Blatch, I was just getting on a roll.
The Southerners refuse to march in a parade with colored women.
You've included the Negroes.
Of course. This is a suffrage demonstration. It has nothing to do with race. Now, when we release the doves,
Miss Paul, bans and floats and doves are bad enough.
Shouldn't women of all races and classes be able to walk side by side for equal rights?
Don't be naive. Are you your mother's daughter or aren't you?
My mother and I didn't agree on everything.
Well, we have to pick our battles.
Is the prejudice against Negroes really that strong?
How long were you in England exactly?
You need to assure America that Negro suffrage has nothing to do with us.
We can't participate in the parade?
It's for the greater good. I'm sure you understand.
We understand the hypocrisy of condemning prejudice and rejecting colored suffragists in the same breath.
How about a compromise? You could all march together at the end.
Racial segregation is hardly a compromise.
If I were a colored woman, I'd be happy to march with my race.
Would you now?
I'm sorry, but this is the best I can do.
We'd better tell the others.
You know what? No. I've been a suffragist longer than many of these white women have been alive. I'm here to represent the colored women of my state. I won't let them down.
Gun sounds. White women begin marching.
Look at all the people. There's barely room to walk.
Single file, ladies. No talking or waving.
Miss Paul, are you sure you have this crowd in hand?
We demand the right to vote.
We demand the right to vote.
We demand the right to vote.
The vote.
Demand the right to vote.
Song of the Women by Florence Kuiper.
This is a song of women sung to the marching feet
of mothers and daughters of mothers out in the crowded streets.
We envision a better future that lures us with its gleam.
And our marching lines and our tramping feet are hot on the trails of a dream.
This is a song of women sung to the marching feet, our mothers and daughters of mothers out in the crowded streets.
We envision a better future that lures us with its gleam.
Our marching lines and our tramping feet or hot on the trail of our dream.
I proudly march with my state delegation. No colored lines exist in the first national parade for equal suffrage.
Miss Paul, you were supposed to take care of this.
I thought I had.
Mob enters, forcing the women to stop marching, growing increasingly violent.
Get back to the kitchen where you belong. I'll show you what I'd do if you were my wife.
There's nothing we can do about the colored women now.
We're under attack.
Don't look, don't listen.
Try to keep moving. We can't fight back.
Where are the police?
If anything proves we need the ballot, this does.
The parade riot freezes as they all watch the president drive past them.
President Wilson, while you travel in comfort and safety to the White House, the government left women at the mercy of a howling mob in the very streets being protected for men.
My parade was a resounding success.
Over 100 women in the hospital. You call that a success?
Optics. Mrs. Catt, leave it to me and we will be voting within the year.
Mrs. Terrell, we're so sorry for your loss.
3 babies in 5 years. People don't understand how you can mourn for a child you've barely known.
Those people have never lost a child.
The first was when Tommy was lynched. Did my grief for him kill my unborn son?
If that were true, there wouldn't be a Black child alive in this country.
You can't blame yourself.
My husband blames the medical care at the colored hospital.
Don't even get me started on that death trap.
What kind of life does a colored child have in America anyway? Maybe all our children would be better off dead.
No, Mrs. Terrell, that's just grief talking. Think about everything we're doing to make things better for our children.
I was proposed to more than once, while I was in Europe. I could have lived a life without prejudice, but I knew I belonged here.
We all feel that duty, don't we? They built this country on the backs of our ancestors, our parents. How else do we honor their labor?
Don't tell anyone I said these things. It would only make people see me as weak, broken.
Mrs. Terrell, you don't have to pretend, at least not with us.
Yes, I do. It's the only way to keep moving forward.
But what it costs?
I can't do anything for my lost daughter, but I can help the other mothers and daughters out there, please.
All right. Well, the colored woman made an admirable showing in the suffrage parade.
And the protesters treated us no worse than the white women.
Let's make sure we point that out to them at the next convention.
You're attending their first convention in the South.
Miss Anthony herself made me an ambassador. Now, I'm not giving up that role. Every time I address the white woman, I put the colored woman in a favorable light.
I have better things to do with my time.
I'll be there, Mrs. Terrell.
Buckle on the armor. You're both going to need it.
1914. National Association, American Women's Suffrage Association.
Welcome, Mrs. Ruffin. Is this your first national convention?
It is. My club has just accepted for national membership.
Well, as you can see, this year's theme is Flowers Represent the Womanhood of the World.
I'm afraid there must be some mistake.
Oh, no mistake. Look, here's a flower with my name on it.
But we didn't realize
that we're a colored club. Mrs. Catt, if women are flowers, then colored women are the blossoms who thrive despite their crown of thorns. Sometimes you find us further on than you expect.
Would you excuse us, please? Mrs. Blatch, think what effort it took to have this convention in the South. We cannot afford to invite the race problem.
Which one of us is making it a race problem exactly?
What would your mother do?
My mother would...
Never mind. Take care of it.
Mrs. Ruffin, don't you also belong to another club?
A white club, you mean?
Yes. Well, what if you attend the convention as the delegate from that club?
You know, this prejudice is exactly why colored women started working with their own organizations instead of with you.
Is it really such an unreasonable request?
No, not if suffrage is only for white women.
It's not, but...
Flowers of the world, my Aunt Fanny. Apparently, this convention is a hothouse and not a garden.
Sisters of the dominant race.
Well, look at that. Mrs. Terrell addressing the national convention. Seems you've got some weeding to do.
Stand up. Stand up not only for the oppressed sex, but also the oppressed race. The vote is withheld because the word people is twisted to mean only boys instead of girls, or white instead of black. Colored men have already lost their right to vote in the South.
Never mind the South. If we want change, we need to look west. 10 Western states with women's suffrage.
Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Oregon, Kansas, Arizona, Alaska.
It's that pioneer spirit.
Washington State already had a colored woman run for state legislature.
In California, the colored women vote 99%, while our white sisters only vote 20%.
Colored and women alike can have a freer life out west.
Except in Tacoma.
We've won Illinois, first women's suffrage state east of the Mississippi.
Thanks to all your club's hard work in Chicago. Congratulations.
We let the Wild West get so far ahead of civilized, educated Eastern women.
Women's suffrage defeated in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York.
We need a constitutional amendment.
You know we don't have enough support in Congress or from the president.
Then we need a political party for Western women voters to focus on electing candidates who will pass the Susan B. Anthony Amendment.
You know, naming the amendment for Aunt Susan and nobody else might give the wrong impression.
If men won't give us what we want, we'll get it ourselves.
A woman's political party? That's ridiculous.
And if the National doesn't like the idea, I'll do it on my own.
Miss Paul, you don't remember how dividing the movement played out for the last generation.
Our power lies in a unified band of women.
A unified band of white women, she means.
And not anymore.
It's easy to be powerless together. I'm not interested in being powerless anymore.
Mrs. Blatch, how can you desert the organization your own mother helped found?
My mother would never have shied away from pushing people's buttons. If Miss Paul can lead us into action, then...
But the South will never accept a constitutional amendment that undermines white supremacy.
Mrs. Catt, if racial prejudice is the principle of your leadership, I'd rather see us go to pieces.
Thank God the Negro was freed. I wish him every happiness, but not by encroaching on the Anglo-Saxon race.
Oh no, she did not just say that.
And now there will be two groups of white suffragists to shut us out.
Again.
There are plenty of colored women voters in the West. Maybe Miss Paul will remember that.
Or maybe Southern prejudice is just an excuse to hide their own.
Isn't this why we have our own clubs with our own agendas? We have so many other battles to fight, to take care and lift up our own people.
The vote is still the key to half of what we need. With the white woman, we can accomplish that much more.
I used to think that too. But if we don't put a stop to poll taxes and all these other Jim Crow laws, getting the vote won't make any difference for us. And the white women have shown how much they care about that.
I can't separate being colored from being female. But as long as I continue to work with them, they can't forget we exist.
Just knowing we exist isn't enough. The white women can only handle one question at a time, and we're not part of it.
Do you think they even spend a fraction of the time talking about us that we spend talking about them?
Only to figure out how to get us out of their way.
1917, Sentinels of Liberty.
1917, National Women's Party meeting.
Miss Paul, why is it so cold in here?
If I keep the office cold, I'm not tempted to relax.
You look like you could use a decent meal, too.
I'll eat when we can vote. Can we stop talking about me and start talking about a new idea to get the president to support suffrage?
What about a picket line in front of the White House?
Picketing the White House? I've never heard such a thing.
So we'll be the first.
Yes. Yes. Standing outside the White House will show how we're unjustly shut out of the political process. We'll call ourselves the
Sentinels of Liberty. Who's with me?
Yes.
I'm in.
Of Liberty. Grab a banner and let's go.
Women form a picket line holding signs.
Song of the Women by Florence Piper.
This is a song of women sung to the marching feet
of mothers and daughters of mothers out in the crowded street.
Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage?
We envision a better future that lures us with its gleam.
And our marching lines and our tramping feet are hot on the trails of a dream.
Mr. President, how much longer must women wait for liberty?
Here comes the president.
They watch the president drive past them.
Did he really just pretend he didn't see us?
Now, you all know what it feels like to be invisible.
Shall we picket again tomorrow?
We're picketing every day until we win.
Chorus enters as mob.
This picket line is an insult, bad manners, and mad banners. President Wilson keeps us out of war.
President Wilson keeps us out of suffrage.
Out of war.
Out of suffrage.
Out of war.
Out of suffrage.
The conflict escalates.
Mrs. Terrell, picketing with them?
Out of war.
Out of suffrage.
Suffrage.
Are you out of your mind?
The Those women wouldn't stop for a hot minute before sacrificing you to that mob. Ambassador or not, they'll link arms and push you right to the front.
I told you, I wouldn't choose sides.
Why are you so determined to be their scapegoat?
They have their expediency and I have mine.
You won't catch me standing out here in the cold.
We have hot bricks to keep our feet warm.
Holds up her sign again.
Just remember to duck when they start throwing those bricks at you.
1917, United States joins the war in Europe.
Blatch and Paul are holding signs.
How can the United States fight for democracy abroad when we don't have democracy at home?
How can the United States protect the world when it doesn't protect its own colored citizens?
How can you still be picketing? Criticizing a wartime president gives us all a bad name.
We're only asking for the same precious principle our soldiers are dying for overseas.
Women must support the war effort. Service and sacrifice
lead to suffrage? That's what my mother thought 50 years ago.
The police said they're going to start arresting the picketers now.
I'm willing to face the consequence of arrest. I've done it before.
A lot of women don't have that privilege.
Mrs. Terrell, you could recruit more colored women to join us.
Now she wants the colored women.
No colored woman in her right mind will risk getting arrested. Whatever they do to you, it would be 10 times worse for us.
The Sentinels are not giving up. Picketing is our legal right. Has the law changed?
No.
Then they better get their handcuffs ready.
A parade of women comes through carrying signs. As each enters, the police arrest her.
We fight for those who submit to authority to have their voice heard in government. Democracy begins at home.
America is not a democracy. 20 million American women are denied the right to vote.
Kaiser Wilson sympathizes with the Germans because they're not self-governed. American women are not self-governed. Take the beam out of your own eye.
Chorus enters as police.
All you suffragers are under arrest.
We worried Woody Wood by the Sentinels of Liberty.
We worried Woody Wood as we stood. We worried him right good as we stood. We asked him for the vote, but he'd rather write a note. So we stood.
Chorus enters as judge in the courtroom.
The sentence of the court of the woman's...
We do not consider ourselves subject to this court since we have no voice in the laws that put us here.
Then you leave me no choice. 90 days in the Agnew workhouse.
Society ladies in jail with criminals and Negroes.
And that's another reason we won't join your picket lines anymore.
Get them out of my courtroom.
Chorus enters as guard.
Let's see how you suffragists like it in jail.
Guards violently drag the women out of the courtroom and into the workhouse.
We'll not get out on bail. Go to jail.
We prefer to go to jail. We're not frail.
Black female prisoner enters as guard throws Paul and Blatch into a cell.
Shut up, or it'll be gags and straitjackets for all of you.
You must be those suffragettes.
We call ourselves suffragists.
I've seen your parades. I hope you do get the vote. Fix things up for women.
When we get the vote, you will too.
Me? I don't know about that.
We should go on a hunger strike.
The food's full of worms. You won't want to eat it anyway.
When they try to force feed you, keep your mouth shut so they can't shove the tube down your throat.
That makes them stop?
Well, no, then they shove it up your nose instead.
If you won't eat, then your leader's going into solitary.
We were choking for some air. So unfair. So unfair.
We were choking for some air. So unfair.
We were choking for some air, and they threw us in a lair.
They threw us in a lair. So unfair.
Miss Paul smuggled a note out of jail. They're being kept chained and beaten.
Well, they've always liked comparing themselves to slaves.
Even President Wilson is starting to take notice.
But an innocent pregnant colored woman is lynched in Georgia and he does nothing.
200 white women arrested for picking the White House? What do you think will happen if you keep speaking up against the president?
It won't be the first time I've had a price on my head for the truth, or the last.
You thought I should stop picking him because it was too risky.
Because it's one thing to throw yourself on your sword for their fight. It's another when it's for ours.
When did suffrage stop being our fight?
It's their suffrage. That's not our fight.
But our suffrage doesn't exist without theirs.
When was the last time you heard a white woman speak of universal equality? Meanwhile, Black people are dying. If white women would stand up against lynching, the problem would end and we could all focus on suffrage.
Guard returns with Paul to the cell.
Miss Paul, what's going on?
We've got the country's sympathy now. All of our arrests have been ruled illegal.
Get moving, suffragers. You're being released.
What about me?
We'll do everything we can to help you from out there.
I'm sure you think you will. Now, ladies, take the hint. As ye stand, as ye stand. Now, ladies, take the hint as ye stand. Now, ladies, take the hint. Don't quote the president. Don't quote the president as ye stand.
1918, National Association of Colored Women.
Mrs. Terrell, how can you hold a convention in my own city without me?
I'm sorry, but the other Chicago women said if you participated, they wouldn't.
So you just take their side? Throw Mrs. Barnett under the bus?
After everything I've done for those women, this is the thanks I get? Haven't I done all that one human being can do for this movement? What more do they want from me?
They say you make things difficult.
I admit I can be hard-headed,
And
but that's still...
for an activist.
You're like a bull in a china shop.
You know, nobody would ever say that about me if I were a man. And I don't see that your politics of respectability are any better.
That's part of the problem now, isn't it?
Oh, goodness sakes, Molly, don't you ever get angry.
Of course I do. I just let my temper get the best. I just don't let my temper get the best of me. I put my energy toward uplift.
Uplift? How high can you go when other people keep lowering the ceiling?
Our own people, no less. Just because I'm not willing to bow and scrape.
Come on. Don't be like that. You know, I've always considered you a friend.
But we're not in this life to make friends, are we? We're in it to make a change.
And if this is how you treat a friend, I hate to see what you do to your enemies.
I don't want to fight with either of you.
Better to die than like a rat in a trap.
How can we lift as we climb if we constantly tearing each other down?
Where else can we speak our minds when we're presenting ourselves as the perfect models of Black womanhood to everyone else?
Would you listen to us? Why are we fighting each other? Have we become just as bad as the white women?
Being our own best argument is exhausting.
And unrealistic.
But what other choice do we have?
Anthony Amendment passes the House with 1 vote to spare.
Only 40 years since its first introduction in Congress.
But the Senate defeats it.
We need the president to put more pressure on the Senate.
Then we need to put pressure on the president. Picketing isn't enough.
How about a fire? We light this torch for the burning indignation of women given words without action by President Wilson.
We commit the president and his empty promises to the flames.
Holds up an effigy of the president and throws it into the fire.
You're burning the president in effigy when 3,000 Negroes have been lynched just like that since Reconstruction?
That's nothing like what we're doing here. This is civil disobedience.
The amendment is still 2 votes short. We're doing everything we can to get them.
Including reassuring the Senate that the Anthony Amendment won't prevent states from anything they're already doing to maintain white supremacy.
Our goal is simply to make voting conditions the same for women as they are for men.
Meaning colored women will be stopped from voting just as easily as colored men are, and you won't do a thing about it.
Why don't you complain to the lawmakers instead of us?
Do you really think we're not?
Miss Paul, the colored woman bears the burden of more misery than anyone. We ask for help from those responsible for this burden.
Are you saying we're responsible?
Race is covered by the 15th Amendment. There's no point in muddying the water.
We can't separate being colored from being female.
How do you not see that excluding us from our race is the same as excluding you for your sex?
Why must you people harass us?
For the same reasons you harass the president.
And once again, white women turn their backs and let Black women go down the drain.
I'm sorry.
Sorry isn't good enough, Mrs. Blatch, no matter who your mother was.
Or maybe because of it.
But I don't agree with her. I used to read Sojourner Truth her letters. Frederick Douglass stayed at our house often.
Mrs. Blatch, I was born a suffragist, just like you. Despite what Mrs. Harper once said, I believe the ballot will cure a lot of our ills. So if you're not helping solve the problem, as you should, do shut up and get out of the way.
1919, Senate approves the Anthony Amendments.
I thought we'd never see the day.
A whole year to win 2 votes.
My new slogan is, success is a state of mind, and that's where I'm registered to vote.
Catchy.
It makes victory seem inevitable. Everyone likes to be on the winning side.
One final push to the Constitution. Isn't it time to let go of our differences and work together again?
For the sake of pure idealistic women's suffrage? Agreed.
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 Oh, Mrs. Terrell, I didn't realize that you were...
Yeah. Oh, I know. But colored women all around the country want the same as you. 36 states to ratify.
That's right.
That's right, you tell it.
The antis only need 13 to defeat it.
Then we all better get to campaigning, hadn't we?
11 states ratified Anthony Amendment in the first month.
But Georgia and Alabama have already rejected it.
Arkansas, California, Maine.
Roll up your sleeves and set your mind to making history.
Oregon, Indiana, Wyoming, Nevada.
Voted down in South Carolina and Virginia.
Goodbye and good luck, and don't give up until your state ratifies.
Idaho, Arizona, New Mexico, West Virginia.
Rejected by Maryland and Mississippi.
We just won Washington. Only one more to go.
Tennessee is our last hope, but it's going to be close.
All hands on deck. We need every suffragist available in Nashville now.
Except the colored women, of course.
Are you serious?
You know your presence can't help us win in the South.
And if we lose Tennessee, we lose the Anthony Amendment.
Mrs. Blatch.
Truth is, there's no Negroes allowed inside the Capitol building in Nashville anyway.
So much for pure, idealistic women's suffrage.
Tennessee, War of the Roses.
1920, last chance for suffs in Tennessee.
White women enter the legislature for the final vote.
What's our tally?
47 yes votes we can count on.
For the moment, it keeps changing.
Porras enters as Speaker of the House.
Senator, wait! Why are you wearing a red rose? It's yellow for suffrage.
Sorry, sweetheart. The antis paid me $100 for my vote.
100? My goodness. They're paying the other senators $5.
$500? Ooh, those crooked so-and-sos. Oh, excuse my language, ma'am.
Oh, of course. Can we count on you after all, Senator?
Give me that yellow rose. The Tennessee legislature will come to order.
Our history is being decided, and all we can do is watch.
Our future is being decided, and we're not even able to watch.
We're still one vote short.
We need a miracle.
Senator Byrne, what is your vote for the Anthony Amendment?
Porras answers as Senator Byrne.
Mr. Speaker, my vote is...
Voice of Mrs. Byrne interrupts, writing a letter.
Dear son.
Mother?
Hurrah, and vote for suffrage.
Porras as Speaker of the House.
Senator Byrne?
Be a good boy and help Mrs. Catt put the rat in ratification.
Senator Byrne, your vote?
Signed, your mother.
Chorus as Senator Byrne.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to be recorded as voting aye.
Did he just say aye?
If he has changed his vote, then...
Chorus as Speaker of the House.
In favor of Susan B. Anthony Amendment, Tennessee confirms ratification to the U.S. Constitution.
We've won!
We won! We won!
Song of the Women by Florence Kuiper and an Appeal to Women by Sarah Fortin Purvis.
This is a song of women, tired with the passing of years.
Of the mothers of mothers of mothers, and proud is she who hears.
We envision a social justice that knows the end of might.
The weak and the poor and the thwarted.
The weak and the poor and the colored.
reaching the end of the fight.
Dare to be good. Dare to be great.
Despise the taunts of ridicule, scorn, and hate.
Our skins may differ, but here we claim
a sister's privilege, a sister's name.
A social justice. All those years of frustration and sacrifice.
All that just to add a single sentence to the Constitution.
1920. The right of citizens to vote shall not be denied on account of race.
Women's suffrage is now a fact.
White women's suffrage.
We must not rest until we free Black women as well as white.
Until then, white women are just one more burden we carry.
1965. Voting Rights Act prohibits all racial discrimination in voting. 2013. Supreme Court overturns the Voting Rights Act. 2020. Senate still has not passed the Voting Rights Advancement Act to restore the laws from 1965.
Did you think the vote was a simple transaction? A gift?
One day, women asked nicely and men gave it to them.
Now you know that's not how it happened.
Now you know how much it cost.
And how we are still paying. Your great new millennium did not come when white women got the vote.
Welcome to 21st century America.
Racism is a word now.
Sexism is too.
We're not trying to make excuses. We thought we were doing the best we could.
Right. 100 years later, we're still passing the battle forward.
Until all of us are free, none of us are free.
Maybe the next generation can learn from our mistakes.
How can they learn from women they've never heard of?
Maria Stewart. Anna Julia Cooper.
If white women's history is hidden, and where are the Black women?
Sarah Fortin Purvis. Cora Lee Cook.
First, we had to change history.
Charlotte Fortin Grimke. Nettie Asbury.
Now, we have to change the way it's remembered.
Caroline Remund Putnam. Sylvanie Williams.
It's like you said a long time ago.
Clarissa Lawrence. Maricha Lyons.
History is not what happens.
Patty Purvis. Adela Hunt Logan.
It's the story someone tells about what they think happened.
Lottie Rowland. Fanny Barrier Williams.
History is not the truth.
Lugenia Hope. Nanny Burrows.
You need to shift your viewpoint to see our story.
Mary Talbert. Charlotte Hawkins Brown.
You have to say our names.
Sojourner Truth. Mary Church Terrell.
Marianne Shad Cary. Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin.
Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Ida B. Wells Barnett.
History changes depending on what comes next. You're a part of it.
Link arms. Put the Black women at the center to protect them.
Link arms. Put the Black woman at the center.
If history doesn't allow it, start making your own history.
End of play. Ain't Your Our History by Rachel Atkins. featuring Miranda Thompson as Frances Harper and Ida B. Wells Barnett. Tammy Cooper as Sojourner Truth and Mary Church Terrell. Cashia Fitzgerald Bryant as Mary Ann Shad Cary and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin. Janelle T. Harvey as the Florist. Shannon Agnew as Susan B. Anthony and Alice Paul. Erin Agnew as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Harriet Stanton Blatch. And Ginger Agnew as Patricia Mott and Cary Chapman Catt. And I'm Hannah Spear, the stage manager. Thank you all so much for coming.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much to our lovely performers and to Rachel Atkins, our playwright. This was so exciting, so edifying, so wonderful. So to everybody in the audience, we'd like to invite you to stick around. We're going to begin our Q&A in just a moment. So what's going to happen is we're going to switch all of you out of audience mode and you're going to join us as panelists. So it may seem like your Zoom is cutting out or shutting down. It's not. Just hang tight for a second as we switch you over. And then once you get back, we'll do a big round of applause for everybody and then we'll begin our Q&A. All right, you'll be popping in little by little. All right. So it seems like we have at least a decent amount of people in. So while everybody's joining us, I'd just like to start by introducing everybody and again, feel free turn on your cameras. I mean, it would be great if you could still stay muted unless/when/if you have a question. Also feel free add your pronouns in your Zoom name after your name. And don't forget, submit if you've got questions or comments or anything, you can submit them to the Q&A or to the chat. I will be moderating that. But so to give everybody sort of a minute to think and reflect, we have a couple of extra panelists joining us. So we have 3 folks from the National Association of University Women, which was actually founded by Mary Church Terrell. So they are joining us on our panel today. So if you are one of those 3 folks, please pop in and introduce yourselves. And then the next person that we'll have is Suzanne Almeida, Suzanne Almeida, who is the interim executive director of Common Cause PA. And Common Cause PA works to expand voting rights and election integrity. And they do that in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure Suzanne can tell us a bit more about herself. She's going to speak for a bit. So as it seems like we've got everybody, for a second, feel free to turn off your, unmute yourselves and we'll give a big round of applause. All right. All right, fantastic. So I'd love our 3 folks from the National Organization of University Women to introduce themselves first, and then we'll switch it over to Suzanne, and then we'll dive in. Do we have our panelists here? Well, hopefully they will be able to join us. If they're not here quite yet, that's totally fine. We'll give a minute. Do we have Suzanne?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. All right. Take it away. Take it away. So give us a little bit about yourself. Oh, I'm so sorry. Quickly, let me introduce myself, as I forgot to do that. Kristen Curley. I am the marketing manager for PWTF. Also taking on some of the artistic director responsibilities, as Polly, who is here with us somewhere, is out on maternity leave and hanging with her new little one there, who seems to be sound asleep. Adorable. So great. All right, take it away, Suzanne.
Great. So first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Just like thumbs up. All right. If you stop being able to hear me, like wave your hands or something, and my internet connection will come back, I promise. So my name is Suzanne Almeida. I am the interim executive director of Common Cause Pennsylvania. I am super excited to be here. A little bit about me is that before I was in this role, I actually was the executive director of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. So women's suffrage history is near and dear to my heart, as is the need to really lift up the voices that get left out, and to shine a bright light on the places where the women's suffrage movement went terribly wrong, and intentionally wrong, right? Even though everyone at that point was doing their best, we know that there was significant issues with racism, discrimination, and we heard about that today. So when we're talking about voting rights in 2020, obviously we are at, I don't want to say a turning point, but there is a lot happening. We'll just put it that way, particularly in Pennsylvania, but across the country as well. So Common Cause works to expand access to voting, to make sure that every eligible voter can cast a ballot, to give folks options, to make sure folks know their rights. Our big pilot, or our big flagship program on particularly presidential election years is what we call our election protection program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the work that we do at Common Cause and how I see that fitting into kind of this broader movement, which is towards universal suffrage, right? Because we know that our democracy was founded at least on the ideal, even if not the reality, that everyone deserved a vote and that every vote should count, right? So our job at Common Cause is to try to find those places where the system breaks down and then come up with policy solutions or advocacy solutions or people-based solutions to get over that hump. So our advocacy this year falls into kind of three main buckets, right? So one is around the mail-in voting, right? So we were lucky in Pennsylvania to finally last year get the right for anyone who wants to cast a mail-in ballot. With Act 77 that passed in 2019, my favorite talking point about that particular piece of legislation is that before it passed and was signed into law in November of 2019, the last significant update to Pennsylvania's election code had happened before they finished construction on Mount Rushmore. So it had been quite a while and the world had changed fairly significantly since we took a deep look at our election code. And Act 77 didn't fix everything. There are still lots of problems, but one thing it did do that is really beneficial, particularly as we're dealing with COVID, is that it gave anyone who wants to the ability to apply for a vote by mail ballot. So you can apply online, you can apply via paper application. As long as you are a registered and eligible voter, you should be approved for that. And then as soon as that ballot comes in the mail, you can mail it back. Now, that's the way the system's supposed to work. We know that there are places that that system breaks down, partially for policy reasons, partially just because, quite frankly, it's a new system, right? We're working through the kinks of something that many states who now have a significant vote by mail program took years and years and many, many election cycles to get to the place that they are today, right? So if we look at states like Oregon, Washington, Colorado, all of whom have big vote by mail programs, Oregon and Washington are exclusively vote by mail. That was not a 6-month turnaround, right? So we're working not just to change the policy and to make sure the policy is makes sense. So things like making sure that election directors can start opening those envelopes before 7 a.m. on election day, which is what that current timeline is, right? Like if we want results and we want our election directors and staff to have time to do the work that they need to do accurately, they need more time to do that. So we're working to change that deadline. We're working to make sure that ballots that are postmarked by election day, not received, right? The current law says you have to be received by your Board of Elections at 8 p.m. on election day in order for your mail-in or absentee ballot to count. We are trying to move that to a postmark deadline, right? So as long as it's in the mail, as long as the mail has been picked up by 8 p.m. on election day, your vote would count. We're working to make sure that there aren't discrepancies in how counties are processing vote by mail ballots. We're working to make sure that counties have the technology that they need, and more importantly, that counties are being really clear with voters about what a voter needs to know to vote by mail, right? Because it's new for the voters, just like it's new for the counties. We're also working on in-person voting, right? Because like we know that even in this COVID pandemic, there are folks who don't trust vote by mail, and that's their right, right? Like it is perfectly acceptable for you as an individual, as a registered voter, to say, you know what, I want to go to the polling place. I want to push the buttons. I want to feel like I have voted the same way I have for however many years. And so we're doing work to make sure that that happens in a safe, secure, and accessible way in November, to make sure that poll workers are safe, to make sure that voters are safe, to make sure that we know in advance where our polling places are going to be, make sure that voters have the materials that they need, and the technology is working. So it's kind of a surround sound piece. And then finally, our big push is voter education, right? So all of this is, and I'm gonna assume that the folks who take the time on their Sunday afternoon to listen to a fabulous virtual play about women's suffrage and how that suffrage movement failed Black and brown women who were part of that movement are folks who have a decent understanding of how our electoral system works, right? But we are not it, right? There's a lot of people who have a lot of other things going on, who think about elections once a year, maybe once every 4 years, almost certainly. And so our job at Common Cause is to work not just with our membership, but to work with our partners to make sure that every voter in Pennsylvania has the tools that they need to make the decisions that they're going to make. So I could talk a lot longer, but I'm going to finish on one thing and then I'll turn it back over. So it is 2020 in Pennsylvania. There's lots of things that we can all do to help. One of the things that Common Cause does is we run an election, what's called an election protection program. We are a nonpartisan organization, right? So we do not support candidates. We do not support parties. Our job is to make sure everyone who can vote does vote, and everyone who does vote has a good experience at the polls. So we are recruiting volunteers for election day to stand outside polling places or provide be rovers, right? Because we know that not everyone's going to be comfortable in these COVID times, physically being close to folks. And I will put that link in the chat, but if folks are looking to sign up and volunteer, it's incredibly meaningful. One of our wins, I suppose, from the primary is we had volunteers who were in Philadelphia, many volunteers who were in Philadelphia, but towards the end of the night, we had a polling place that was probably around 8 o'clock, right? So polls close at 8. You all know this, but if you are in line to vote when polls close, you stay in line, you cast your ballot, right? Not everybody knows that, so that's problem number one. Number two is, I don't know if you all remember, but Philadelphia was under a curfew that night, and that curfew wasn't extended past 8 p.m. So we had voters who were standing in line and were really worried about what that intersection was going to do. And then we had poll workers, probably because they had not been trained well, telling people, sorry, you got to go home. Like if you were at this point in the line by like 8, you could stay and vote, but if you're past that, you can't. So our volunteers were able to show up in person, talk to the judge of elections. We got on the phone with the Philly city commissioners who run the elections and made it clear that that wasn't acceptable and kept those folks in line. But that's the kind of like really meaningful work that we get to do as part of the election protection program. And I'll turn it back over to Kristen. I saw a question in the chat, but I'm assuming you want me to wait.
Yeah, so that's your whole awesome spiel there. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Yeah, so we can start up the question portion. And I'd also like to just make a note that we do have our fabulous playwright, Rachel Atkins, in the audience. So if anybody has a question for Suzanne, for Rachel, for Ginger, who was our director, as well as one of the performers or any of the performers, Hannah, our stage manager. So feel free to fire them off. You know, you can use the raise hand function or type in the Q&A or the chat box. But so yeah, we'll kick it off. Question for Suzanne. Can I vote in person if I registered to vote by mail due to Trumpian interference with USPS?
So it depends on how you register to vote by mail, right? If you just register for the primary, you're still good to go. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and vote in person. If you registered for what in Pennsylvania is called permanent, but really just means for the full year, then you have two options. One, you can call your Board of Elections and ask to change your registration, and that would be my recommendation. The second is if you receive your mail-in ballot, you can go to your polling place on election day, bring that ballot with you. They will spoil that ballot and allow you to vote in the machine. Or if you somehow lose that ballot, you are still entitled to vote on a provisional ballot. But that provisional ballot is going to slow down the process, and you may need to provide additional information to the Board of Elections just to ensure that nobody is voting twice.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so let's open the floor. And I guess I can jump in with a question if nobody has one immediately, directed at Ginger and the performers. What was the biggest challenge you would say for you folks while trying to get this thing up and going?
Technology.
Relatable.
Also not being together, like for real together was, I mean, I feel we bonded over technology, but you know, a little disconnect, which is not what we're used to as performers.
I totally agree with Ginger. I missed being close to everyone. And my biggest challenge was lighting.
Very real. Very, very real.
Yeah, we asked a lot of our performers because, you know, we had a very short time to put this together, and we did a lot of research. Everybody did a lot of reading. We watched some sections of documentaries separately together, and we did a lot. And then we didn't have a lot of opportunity to, but we tried to come together and share some of what we learned, the highlights of that, so that we could share with each other and also just kind of make sure, you know, we were all on the same page with some ideas. And we asked each of our actresses to be her own tech person, and, you know, tech, lighting, sound, and we had issues with all of it, and including the internet connections and thunderstorms and yeah, so many things. So thank you for bearing with us, because we know tech wasn't perfect today either, but we did our best.
Absolutely. Any other questions? I can jump in with another. Oh, we have one. I'm curious about how explicitly the evolution of language and terms played into this play. Where did the playwright, so Rachel, this at you, where did the playwright research and what terms were used or not used? How did it impact everyone involved to think about how racism wasn't a word during these movements? That's a fantastic question. Yeah, so I guess any of the performers, or Rachel, if you'd like to jump in.
Is Rachel here? That's a great question for her.
She is. I do see. I think her video's loading up. Yep. Yeah. There
I'm
she
here.
is.
I was just hiding. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I did a ton of research. I did, you know, a year and a half plus of research on top of sort of foundational knowledge I had about the movement from previous work I'd done. And it, now I'm thinking about what's the, I mean, it's certainly, sorry, there's a plane going on overhead. I tried to use language that was appropriate for the time. And I mean, certainly things like the idea that racism was not a word in the beginning is a part of it. You know, part of what I want to show in this play is also the ways in which what happened 100 years ago is the same as what's happening now. And so I'm sure you notice there are times and places where I take some liberties with language because I want that to be on the forefront of what you're seeing and hearing, even when you are in, even when you're in a historical moment, that you as a modern audience are recognizing the ways in which this is reflective of what's happening right now and the ways that things need to change right now, as well as how they needed to change then. I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's my response to start.
Yeah, and I guess jumping off of that, Rachel, did you feel like the play changed at all or rang different? You know, after the Black Lives Matter protests, you know, really ramped up, and you know, sort of during the pandemic and all that's been going on these days.
Well, sure. I mean, it just makes it more painful, right? And more painfully obvious and clearer maybe to folks who weren't before everything that's happened in the last few months, people who hadn't been paying attention to the ways in which this history is the same as it is today. And now I think it's far more on the forefront of people's awareness. And I hope that helps. I mean, that's what we need, right? Like, we need everybody paying attention to the fact that racism is alive and well, and we need to do something about it.
And I don't want to put words in any panelists' mouths. Erin, were you about to say something?
I was, but I can.
No, go ahead.
So I thought that the language choices in the script were really striking for, of course, all of the reasons that Rachel just discussed. But I'm currently a law student actually, but worked as a historic interpreter. So like in costume, doing first person work prior to law school, among other jobs. And one of the things that I did a lot of research about and tried to build into those characters and kind of museum experiences that people had is that people don't get an excuse for eventually making the right decision. And of course, that's the crux of this play. Because I think very often people say like, oh yeah, well, sure, James Madison wrote the Constitution and he had slaves, but you know, most people owned other humans that they purchased through an international human trafficking trade. And that's not true. There has always been a fight for abolition. There has always been a fight against prisons. Since the founding of the police, subsequent to the police were kind of founded as an institution that was going to recapture people who were escaping slavery and then returned them to those who thought they legally owned them. And that is kind of still part of the history of how people use police and choose to call police when they feel safe or unsafe. So no one gets an excuse when they're looking back at history and saying, oh, I like this person's thought. I like what that person wrote, because there has always been a movement against what is wrong. So you can't look at a George Washington, at an Elizabeth Cady Stanton and say, yeah, she harbored all of these things, but you know, everyone did in that time, because that's not true. And that's something that we really have to seek out ourselves as information. So I think plays like this are so important, and continuing to educate ourselves and the next generation, some of who are on this call, which is great. We have to continue to build that into how we think about our history and our legal foundation.
Very, very well put. Thank you. Also, I think many of us agreed when we did our research that we were maybe a lot less educated on some of these women than we had any idea we were, because, you know, our education system doesn't focus on certain things in in the process of educating us. And I went to school a very long time ago, but I don't even remember learning about suffrage at all. But also I don't remember a lot of what I learned in school. But so a lot of us agreed that, wow, we really need to regroup and revamp what we learn in school and out of school about how change really came around and who fought for it. Additionally, we had some lines we had to keep going over just because of tech things or whatever. And some of the particularly painful ones that we had to say again and again because stuff wasn't working or whatever, really, we were apologizing to each other because it hurt. So, there were just some times when we were like, oh, no, we don't want to say that one again. Okay. And we had to push through and say painful things, and really felt that deeply, I think, each one of us.
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly into my next question, Ginger, which is for our actors of color, our Black actors here on the call. What was there anything that struck you about embodying these women during, in 2020, like in particular, that was difficult or that you found joy in, or what was that experience like?
I felt their strength in times of like, it's so reminiscent of like what's going on now. But I really appreciated their strength, that they kept on persevering in spite of. So that kind of gave me some self-esteem about it today, because I remember when Trump first, and I'm not, judging anybody's political parties, but I do remember when he got elected. I've already experienced racism as a child. I knew that I was different, even having, now they have plenty of Black dolls and Black Barbies. But when I was growing up, all I had to really look at was those of white, hair different and everything like that. So I remember when Trump got elected, the day he got elected, I was on my way to New York going to 30th Street Station, and this white man just came down the steps and pushed me out the way. So I'm like, really? So I feel like it's more blatant now, you know what I mean? And in many different situations, but persevere, keep on going, you know what I mean? I understand that we all can get along. I guess it's the same things with different religions too. We all can coexist, if we put our biases aside. But it just seems that America was founded on the backs of our ancestors and, taken away from a people that were already here, that existed. So it just seems like the history of the past continuously happens, even though there are progresses and things like that, but we're still fighting today. So I just appreciated their strength and learning more about them. Because, you hear in school, you hear about Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks. And they were really, and Christopher Columbus. So those are the people that I learned about in school, but never really in depth of African-American history.
I really
Absolutely.
enjoy
Yeah,
being
thank you.
I'm sorry.
All right, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really enjoy being able to play such a strong Black female. I was surprised as I was reading it and going through it, just the sassiness that they had and the spunk at a time when Black people were being told, go to the back, you're not important, you don't have a voice. And it was just so powerful to be able to play a role like that. So I, like Miranda just said, I really enjoyed their strength and the power that they embody in that time.
Yeah, I think that came across loud and clear, the way like these women speak and the interactions, and they stood their ground. They stood their ground. Yeah. Any other performers want to weigh in?
Tammy, did you unmute for a moment? Did you want to say something?
I did. I pretty much agreed with the two women that spoke beforehand. I did enjoy their strength. I enjoyed the fact that even as they were aging, they were still pressing forward. And that's pretty much where I am, aging and still pressing forward. So the best part I enjoyed about the play in a totality is the cast. When we first began, our director read us a statement. and we was encouraged to hear that statement, to implant that statement. And even though we was using it for this particular project, I intend on using that statement throughout life because it was something that made me feel like we were all sisters, no matter what our race was, that we have built a little family here. And if they don't get anything, I want them to get that we showed them what real sisterhood is. And that's what I get out of it. I just appreciate each and every one of this, you ladies, my newfound sisters. And I just hope that everybody feel what we felt as we was sharing. That's it.
That's awesome. And I would say I think that also definitely came through. Like the way you all worked with one another and even though you're separated by all this technology, definitely came through. I have a question for Suzanne. Do we have any other? Oh, Polly and Bo together. Oh, fantastic. So can I throw it to, so Suzanne, I was wondering, as somebody who does a lot of work around voting and women and voting rights, was there anything that you learned from the play? I know that there was a lot that I learned. I'm curious from your end as somebody who pays a lot of attention to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is always striking to me how little of the suffrage movement gets lifted up, right? It is, as with so many things, a really complex social movement that, as I said before, made a lot of mistakes, did a lot of things wrong, pushed Black people to the back, and in ignoring them probably took longer than it would have had it been a unified message. I think that that's the thing that just always strikes me is that and the fact that, you know, getting the right to vote isn't the right to vote, right? It's so much of what I do is making sure that that right is in fact a right, right? There are folks out there, and I talk about this all the time in my work, that there's kind of like two types of people in America. One who thinks everybody has the right to have a voice and that we should do things to make sure that those voices, particularly the ballot box, can be heard. And there's another group that think only people who look like them, think like them, act like them, and have all of the same privileges as they do should be able to be heard. And I think that that's, you know, the story doesn't end. And I think that the play made that clear, but the story doesn't end. And we're constantly evolving this, what it means to have a right to vote. I have regular conversations with folks who are like, well, you know, if people really cared, then they would vote, right? And I think we see the stories of these amazing women who led this movement, and they were folks that really cared and chose to dedicate their life to it. But not everybody can do that. Not everybody should have to do that. And so it's that kind of interplay that I find really, really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, Rachel, one of my favorite things about this piece is the discussion. You know, we at the Philadelphia Women's Theater Festival are, you know, big advocates for and concerned with motherhood and theater and what it means to be a caretaker, and, you know, want to and need to have a life outside of being a caretaker. And I think one of the things that this does so well, and Erin, I can't remember off the top of my head your character's name at the beginning there though, but I love the juxtaposition of those two conversations of the two white women saying, you know, oh yeah, you know, she'll stay home with her kids, but she can also go out, you know, to have the privilege to be able to do that, versus, you know, the conversation that the Black women were having of like, yeah, I would love to be able to raise my kids and do this, but it's just not possible for me. And I thought, you know, there's so much in that and so much to explore. And Rachel, also back to you, I was wondering, I loved your appearance on the podcast. It was fantastic. And we can link to that. But I would love for you to give a little bit of an overview about the discussion of suffragist versus suffragette.
Oh, sure.
which was definitely something that I learned, and I think others did too.
It's one of my little band get on my grandstand things with this piece that American, well, and I put it in the play. It's in the play. American women called themselves suffragists. British women called themselves suffragettes. And, you know, in one of the many ways that history gets distorted, everybody calls all women who fought for the right to vote suffragettes. But suffragette was like, it was demeaning. It was like, oh, aren't you, you know, little cute woman who wants the vote? And the British women took that word back and they called themselves suffragettes as they were doing incredibly radical, violent things that American women did not do. American women did not do that. American women continued to call themselves suffragists. And everybody gets it wrong. Like, nobody should feel bad about that because nobody learns that. But I feel like if there's one thing, I said this in the podcast, but it was partly because I'd talked about so many other things that are important to me about this play before, that by the time they got to like, what do you want us to know? It was my thing that was left, which is, don't call them suffragettes because that's demeaning. Call them suffragists because that's what they wanted to be called. So there you go.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think we're sort of coming to the end here, but we're still happy to take and open to any more questions.
Janelle, you didn't get a chance to say anything. Would you like to weigh in on this?
Yes, I agree with all my castmates said. And well, what was most significant to me, I mean, if I was articulating this to any other group, I'd be embarrassed. But my role for Frederick Douglass, I gotta be honest, I was not very thoroughly aware of his role in the women's suffrage movement. And so this entire play was extremely intriguing in that respect because I learned about him. I learned about, you know, many other colored women on his journey, as well as the white women as well. So it was like a high school college course in less than 2 hours.
Yeah, fantastic. It was just fantastic. I think I can speak for everybody saying what a play, what a piece, what a performance. Just fantastic. Oh, really great. So just to shout out, check out our chat box here. We have some good discussion going here, some cool resources. So on that note, do we have any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, well, I guess that about wraps us up for the evening, unless Christine had anything to jump in and say.
No, I'll just say thank you to everyone. The play was beautiful. It really, I agree. It was a history lesson in 2 hours. And thank you to all the actors and to Ginger and Hannah for taking us on this journey, and to Rachel Atkins for your beautiful words and your incredible research. And thank you to all of you for being here in attendance. And Suzanne, to you as well. Thank you for that education and just bringing it back to what's going on today, and our rights as voters and how we can deal with potential disenfranchisement that we see or foresee with our mail-in ballots this year. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Make sure you join us. Our other pieces, check out phillywomen'stheaterfest.com for the rest of our performances. So, on that note, have a great Sunday evening, everybody. Thanks
See you
for
at the
joining
next
us.
one.
Thank you.